let's look at transitioning from a standing position to a seated position on the motorcycle. And as we see at the bottom position, the rider will come to full seated position, which is typical of most racers. From time to time they will have a different pitch on the motorcycle depending on terrain and so forth. So if we take a look at the angle of the hip, and we can draw this out all the way here, we'll see a position which is closer to about 101 degrees. What we normally measure full hip flexion and extension from is this line here. So if we subtract from there, we get somewhere around 79 degrees or so of hip flexion. So from the seated position, we can take a look at also the knee angle, which is important to look at, and we can see coming straight down, try to get an estimate here, and likewise the knee angle at about 65 degrees would be measured from out this way. So we would subtract 65 from 180-ish, which would give us 115 degrees of knee flexion. Now let's look at the box squat exercise, as we'll watch LJ lower down to the box and then stand back up. And what we can see is that as he lowers himself back down, he arrives back into the seated position into, if we look at the hip angle again like we did in the previous video, we can see somewhere around 87 degrees or so. And of course we're looking at this angle, not so much the hip flexion angle relative to the ground. So we'll look at a little bit of a difference in the hip angle position in this athlete because of the height of the box and the height of the athlete and so forth. But we can also see that this position is very similar to the position on the motorcycle, which makes it a good carryover in terms of strength and positioning. And also we see the athlete arriving at a good organized position at the bottom. As the rider will transition from a seated position to a standing position, we can look at coming to full extension on the bike. This will typically be the position that you will see most riders in, minus the head position. We would like to see more neutral head coming off of the thoracic spine there. Shift the weight forward just a little bit more forward on the knees than we would like, and then we come back up to the standing position, back to neutral. Now let's look at a different athlete performing the same exercise, and we can see that as this athlete arrives at the box, the hip and knee angles will change quite a bit. So primarily what we do have some coaching technical cues we can work on in terms of having make sure that the knees stay back just a little bit, and we can avoid that sort of that valgus knee force at the bottom. This athlete could effectively stand to sit back just a little bit further to the box, which will load the hips a little bit more effectively. But we can see that the spine is neutral, everything is in order, more or less, everything looks pretty good. But we can, the main reason that I wanted to show this is that we can look at this same knee angle and see how it changes between athletes. So now, as we looked into LJ in the previous, he was in the high 80s for this angle here, and now we're in the low 90s. So it can change considerably, and depending on the load on the bar, it can drastically change the amount of torque needed to move that load.